With Senua's Saga HellBlade 2's development well underway, we want to take you behind the scenes of how we're making the next chapter in Senua's story, and just as importantly, why we take the approach we do. Just like with HellBlade Senua's Sacrifice, we want to take you on our development journey with us. Our first stop in this new series of Dev Diaries is to look at how we've captured and realised Saga's location, Iceland, and in particular, how we're building a believable world that our players can sink themselves into.
My name's Dan, and I'm the Environment Art Director here at Ninja Theory. After we decided that the locations would be based on real places within Iceland, we realised that we needed to get some pretty good reference for that. You can get so far by just looking on the internet and Googling these different places, but it's kind of not enough. You need to stand there and actually feel it to get a real sense of the space.
Relying on a location over 800 miles away across the North Atlantic Ocean presents a number of challenges, particularly when ground truth reference is so critical to achieving the level of realism we need. Our environment art team had to find creative solutions to overcome these challenges.
First of all, when we knew that we were going to choose Iceland, the first thing that we did is we wanted to see if we could get elevation data for the entire island itself, which we found. So we got some pretty good resolution data, which was about 2 meters per pixel. But then we soon realised that even at that resolution, it wasn't to the level that was going to work when you're down kind of at ground level with the player. So we needed to find a way of up-resing that. We ended up settling on a service called Drone Deploy, which allows us to map out a capture grid, which is like a flight plan for the drone. You download that to the drone goes up, it takes pictures every few meters. You take all of those pictures and then you feed them into the computer, and then through a process called photogrammetry, it recreates that area in 3D. So we've got a 3D model of that location to something like 7 centimeters per pixel resolution compared to 2 meters.
With a technical solution in place, we were then struck with unexpected news. When the pandemic took hold across the world, our team was sent home to work and all flights were grounded. It was impossible to visit Iceland, and so we needed to find a way to capture Iceland without actually being able to go there.
We had our initial trip planned and ready to go, all specced out, tickets bought, hotels booked, and then the pandemic hit, so that basically scuppered that. We needed to kind of find another way to help us out in the meantime. Initially, we'd been in contact with a photographer and guide out in Iceland called Chris Lund, who had helped us out with the initial location scouting, who had guided us around on our very first trip a few years ago.
I'm Christopher Lund. I'm an Icelandic landscape photographer based in Reykjavik, Iceland. What's unique about Iceland is that you have a lot of variation in landscapes, and you don't have to travel very far. You have this in other countries, but you have to sometimes travel days to be in something completely different. Here you can be shooting on a black beach on a very barren landscape, and then you drive for half an hour and it's lush and green and dramatic waterfalls. This is the reason for Iceland being chosen for the game. A lot of my work is me just looking over weather charts and trying to maximize the shooting time at each location. A lot of these maps are quite large scale, so the drone needs to go, and it has like a 25-minute battery life, and then it has to land and have to change the batteries. And some of these missions are 3 battery switches over an hour of shooting, and the light can change in that time frame quite often. Another factor is strong wind. You can't fly in a very strong wind, so that could also be an issue, and of course rain is a no-go. What I've seen from the development of the game is amazing. Just the quality of the graphics and how lifelike it is.
We spent a lot of time working with him like that remotely, which actually worked out fantastically because he's on tap, he's right there. If we want to go and recapture somewhere else or pick out some other details, we can just give him our flight plans for the drone-based photogrammetry, give him detailed breakdowns of what the things we want scanning, and we could send him out and do our bidding for us.
Eventually, the world returned to some kind of normality. Our team could work in our studio again, and a much anticipated visit to Iceland could be scheduled.
we realised that we needed to go kind of bigger. So we basically completely replanned the trip from scratch. We added 21 locations, 2,500 kilometres worth of travel over 11 days, which was pretty ambitious, but we kind of felt that we needed to sort of cram it in as much as possible. You know, we'd been waiting all this time, so we just needed to go out there and kind of hit it as hard as we could. I'd been lucky enough to previously been out, so kind of felt like I was always banging on about what it's like to be there. And with the other guys in the environment art team, they had to kind of take my word for it. It was essential that they come and kind of experienced it too. If anything, it's quite exciting to kind of go, look, this is how it feels. This is what it feels like to stand on the edge of this crazy looking rock face or this cliff kind of thing. Getting the guys out there to see it in the flesh is like, takes us back to the point about reference. It's about, you know, there's only so much you can get from a photo. It was so valuable to have us all on the same page, you know, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet.
Of course, our work to realise Iceland was based on ground truth reference from modern day. It's important that along with capturing the landscapes, we also bring to life the reality of Iceland as it was in the 10th century.
So outside of visiting Iceland and experiencing the locations, we knew that we wanted to be faithful to the other things that we put in it. So once you start thinking about like the structures and the man-made things that are going to be in the game, we want to approach those in the same way as we've approached the environment itself. Again, reference is key to this. We don't want to make what we think it looks like. We want to get as much reference gathering as possible and be as faithful to what the real thing would have looked like. When we were looking at some of the turf houses, which are the technique they used to use to build their houses, so it's like a timber frame cladded in lumps of earth and which had like kind of grass growing on and things like that. You spend a lot of time dissecting that, watching videos on people building them, trying to break it down into its component parts and being as faithful to that as possible. Similarly, for things that we knew we wanted to make, like various kind of trinkets or idols or different smaller props and things like that, we decided to see if we could make those by hand and then scan those, sticking faithfully to this idea that photogrammetry gives you that extra added level of detail and believability. That led us to set up some small-scale photogrammetry in the studio, which we've got and we use as much as we possibly can, scanning things like bones and totem poles that have been carved by ourselves. The level of realism that we're aiming for will really help with the immersion of the experience. It kind of stops you from questioning the space you're in if we are using all of this kind of reference and these scanned items and things like that. As an environment artist working on this project, it's kind of the project that I've always wanted to make. And you could probably say the same thing for the other guys as well. It's having that ability to recreate something and then putting a slight spin on it yourself. And it's being truthful to the reference, which is quite exciting.
Play it day one with Xbox Game Pass.